Bradley to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. I beg to move that this House has considered sports facilities in Coalfield areas. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. The purpose of this debate is to highlight the importance of properly funding and managing local sports facilities in former mining areas, and particularly to talk about the potential of miners' welfares as a community hub and asset. It's great to see so many colleagues from all sides of the House here present. Many community and sports facilities in coalfield towns were built by British Coal and have since been handed over to the Coal Industry Social Welfare Organisation, or CISWO, which is a national charity supporting former miners and their families with help and advice on disability, ill health and financial hardship. The organisation has responsibility for miners' welfares. There are about 250 recreational charities still operating as independent welfares and an additional 425 where a municipal authority acts as the trustee. In some communities, these facilities are the only remaining social and sporting amenities available for public use. Some centres have adapted and evolved to meet the needs of their local communities. Some trustees run very successful football clubs, while others run bowling greens and other facilities, just as an example. Unfortunately, many have not been successfully run, and their buildings and sports grounds have been run down. I'm concerned that these facilities are not receiving the investment that's required to keep them maintained to a decent standard. There are several local clubs that I'd like to mention, but I'll stick to two key ones. There are many others like them across Mansfield, North Nottinghamshire, and indeed the rest of the country, all linked to former collieries. Welbeck Lions in Meaden Vale is located at the Old Miners' Welfare and provides sporting facilities to one of the most deprived communities within the region. They've got 8 junior and 2 adult teams, a further 3 in development, and they've been proactive in terms of positive plans for future expansion. So I've hosted a meeting for them with the FA and other supportive organisations. The club and its volunteers provide an invaluable service to the local community. They're keen to grow and to expand, but improving their playing surfaces is a priority. They also need floodlit pitches, which are required for the senior team to compete at a higher level, as well as to allow the under-19s to play in a midweek floodlit league. They also have a range of other issues. The sports pavilion only has 1 toilet and can't meet modern regulations. Security is a concern through vandalism and pitches plagued by dog fouling. But the young people who engage with the Welbeck Lions are often from deprived backgrounds. Meaden Vale, where the club is based, is statistically amongst the poorest communities in Nottinghamshire, and the positive impact that sports facilities have on the lives of these local people shouldn't be underestimated. The second is Forest Town Arena, formerly the Welfare, now home to AFC Mansfield, still a focal point for the community in Forest Town and a venue for all sorts of local events where there has been good management, there has been investment, there is a nice facility. It shows what can be done and what more could be done with the right support and coordination. The community spirit that once held mining communities together is very much still there, whatever the Labour Party's political broadcasts might suggest. So the organisations that kept them together have evolved and some have moved on. And the pubs and social clubs that used to be the centre of life, sometimes they have disappeared. The Coalfield communities are left with often run-down community facilities, lack of funding and support for sports provision. A report by the Audit Commission in 2008 stated that the social regeneration has been the least successful component of regeneration in the coalfields. And in 2010, the Department of Health commissioned a report that sought to look at health inequalities in coalfield communities. They raised concerns about whether the previous emphasis on economic regeneration came at the cost of health and social projects. The report stated that health behaviours of men, women and children in these areas are often characterised by poor statistics around smoking, alcohol, poor diet and nutrition coupled with inactivity. Unfortunately, it's also increasingly clear that currently the facilities needed to support more exercise and activity are often not up to scratch within many of these communities. More recently, the benefits of participating in sport for mental health have been established. Studies shown that sport can improve mood, decrease the chances of depression and anxiety, and a more balanced lifestyle. Again, in coalfield communities compared to the rest of the country as a whole, we see high levels of long-term mental health problems across the age range. Sports facilities are not just important for locally well-established teams and inspiring world-class sportsmen. These facilities have a wide range of benefits, including improving the health of young people, older people, and creating positive opportunities for socialising. The new community-focused criteria of Sport England could potentially be hugely beneficial to areas like Meaden Vale, Warsop or Mansfield if that support can be focused on bringing welfares back to life as a hub for the community, for health, sport, social activities, and even to include the provision of services. In Warsop, where they've unfortunately recently lost a leisure centre, a community hub based around a welfare that could bring back all of these things together would be a life-changing thing for so many people in that community. It's more cost-effective than expensive new building and could take place in some of the areas of most need where facilities already exist. The Coalfield Regeneration Trust has supported projects in coalfield areas and helped respond to the threatened closure of outdoor sports facilities such as sports pitches, playing fields and pavilions. The Trust has invested millions of pounds into sports facilities in England, like multi-use games areas, 3G AstroTurf facilities. One of the current priorities for the Trust is health and well-being, and I'm pleased that sport features heavily within their work. In 2006, they undertook a comprehensive review of sport and recreational facilities across coalfields, which provided details of facilities were available to coalfield communities prior to the financial crash. It will be helpful if government might support the Trust to update this database to review which facilities still exist, which are no longer available. I'd be particularly keen to learn about the facilities that are no longer in use, how they were disposed of, what reinvestment was made back into the communities when those facilities were lost. If land was sold, where did that money go? As well as the grants Sport England provides, dozens of national governing bodies award funding packages, as do local authorities. Trustees of coalfield facilities often don't have the experience to apply for these grants. It's also the case that many applications have conditions covering things like minimum participation, which can be difficult. Once established, helping to bring different teams, clubs, other community organisations together under one roof in a welfare-based community hub could help facilitate bidding and winning of investment to make these centres self-sustaining in the future. As I mentioned at the beginning, coalfield communities are often in a slightly unusual position in that many of these community centres and sports facilities have a background in the coal industry rather than being built and maintained by local authorities. And since the transfer of miners' welfare clubs and facilities to CISWO, it's frequently been the case that facilities like football pitches and bowling greens haven't been looked after effectively. In my former role as a district councillor, I was involved in a campaign around Bestwood miners' welfare, along with my colleague, the member for Sherwood, which has been affected by ongoing issues surrounding its management and the maintenance of its facilities. I'm keen for government to look at ways in which local authorities and sporting bodies can work with CISWO on local sport, health and wellbeing priorities in order to support communities like that. In my experience, I'd suggest CISWO is not always the best at facilitating effective management of many of these facilities and ensuring that they are looked after. They work hard to support former miners and their families, provide important assistance to these individuals, but I'm concerned that in prioritising the individuals rather than the long-term community legacy, they're allowing facilities to become run down and that turning a blind eye in some cases to poor management of those facilities is detrimental to communities. Money raised from community buildings seems often to be invested in other priorities of the organisation and not put back into the community where that money came from. Whilst it might be spent nationally on campaigns and information and support for individual miners, it's therefore being drained out of local facilities and leaving coalfield communities worse off. I'm concerned CISWO might not be providing suitable support for the trustees of these facilities. I asked my honourable friend, the Minister, if she might investigate this and see how this process could be improved to support the trustees and the management of these facilities more effectively. My honourable friend, the member for Sherwood, has previously raised concerns in local press about CISWO taking money out of Nottinghamshire with little investment in return. He's rightly criticised them for profiting from the sale of land but not reinvesting it back into local facilities. And it's not just in Nottinghamshire where this is happening. I know that in Yorkshire there have been similar problems. The Yorkshire Post ran an interesting story about recreation grounds in mining communities last year. I fear that CISWO's strategic decision to focus on former miners as individuals rather than on communities, whilst at one time was perhaps understandable, is increasingly to the detriment of those communities. The good news is that in Mansfield and Warsop and across many other mining towns, there are facilities that still exist and space available for sports amenities. I'm not asking government to commit to funding a series of brand new facilities. It's often cheaper to refurbish and improve current facilities with some help. And I'm convinced that some money already exists within a number of external organisations that could be utilised in this way. I'm keen to highlight today in this debate that it won't take huge levels of resources to improve sports provision in coalfield facilities. Excuse me. I'm keen for ministers to consider a small injection of funding to support coalfield areas and improve this provision. Health and well-being, rebuilding social cohesion, but just as important to get the political will behind improving facilities and for government to look at ways in which it might encourage CISWO, local authorities and sporting bodies to work together to improve sports grounds. For the most part, they have willing groups of trustees and volunteers, so the main challenge is getting them to work together, giving them the skills and to release funding from CISWO along with national support from governing bodies. As I touched on earlier, Sport England is helping many communities with health and wellbeing programmes, looking at ways that community assets can be supported and multiple services can be provided from one facility. Miners' welfare clubs and sports grounds in coalfield communities have traditionally been used for a range of purposes, and I hope Sport England will see the potential of many of these facilities as hubs for multiple services. I also believe this would tie in with their work with deprived communities. Their funding programmes like Inspired Facilities and Protecting Playing Fields are helpful, but I'd like to see a specific focus on Coalfield communities and protecting the facilities that currently exist in these areas. As a government, we aim to prove we are committed to supporting Coalfield communities, to advance the cause of some of the country's most deprived areas, and genuinely be about helping than just about managing to have a better quality of life. At the end of 2015, government published a Sporting Future, a new strategy for an active nation, which emphasised the importance of harnessing sports for social good. This was a positive publication, a step in the right direction, and David Cameron, Prime Minister at the time, said that government would target community groups that have traditionally had lower participation rates, places that are less active, less healthy. Coalfield communities generally top the charts in those statistics. As has already been discussed, coalfield communities are generally some of the most deprived in the UK, with poorer health outcomes and low levels of physical activity. I hope that as ministers consider their duty to ensure that absolutely everyone can benefit from sport, they can look to coalfield communities. As the department has noted, the biggest gains and best value for public investment is found in addressing people who are the least active. I thank the Minister for her attendance today. I hope she'll be able to address some of the questions I've raised in my opening speech, and I hope to hear positive contributions from members across the House. I thank you for your time.
The question is that the House has considered sports facilities in coalfield areas. Just a reminder, I'll be calling the front benches at 10 past. John Mann.
Thank you, Mr Owen. And can I thank my neighbour, Member for Mansfield, for calling this debate. And it's a timely one. I represented part of his constituency until the boundary changes of 2010. So Warsop and Welbeck, I know extremely well, and I recall the work put in, myself and my office, in Mead and Vale, in getting initial significant grants to get those playing fields up to any kind of reasonable standard. But that was the beginning, not the end of the process. And for a community like Mead and Vale, with the level of enthusiasm and the number of volunteers, it is fairly obvious to me that the government is sitting health-wise on a gold mine in the former mining communities. CISWO, with the legacy from the coal industry, is responsible for more playing fields in England than any other single organisation. It's a phenomenal fact. And yet, as a body, has never taken that responsibility seriously, has never had a plan. I've had many battles with them, even over the basics of getting investment in, which contrasts totally with the less well-funded Coalfield Regeneration Trust, who've done a superb job, still do, but with meagre resources, with pennies where pounds are needed. And their approach has been absolutely to the point in terms of recognising the economic benefits and the health benefits by investments, including in sporting facilities. My neighbour, Member for Mansfield, is right to highlight the important role that the Coalfield Regeneration Trust still plays. It could do more with more resource. But I'm interested in the possibilities with CISWO and this land. You see, if I look at the CISWO land in my area, we have Haworth, former colliery, cricket, football, it's had weightlifting, archery, Olympic sports. Just got them. £43,000 for floodlights so that the football club, doing very successfully, can be promoted. They're good at raising their own money, but they've never had any significant investment from outside. It's small amounts. And yet they have the land there. They could have one of the FA's multi-purpose, floodlit, 3-4G pitches, full size, instantly losing no facility whatsoever. They have the car park, they have the changing rooms, they have the infrastructure, they have the community involvement, they have the kids, they have the volunteers, critically volunteers. So this is low overhead sport. This isn't about requiring paying loads of people to do loads of things. This is volunteer-led. There, that kind of investment would work. But they're not the kinds of people who've spent their time learning the routes of how to bid for various sums of money. And the money goes elsewhere. And they continue spending their time running mass participation. Coalfield hasn't got any infrastructure there. It's got the fields. It's given over to the district council. It's got the cricket pitch. It's lost the tennis because the bowling, that's long gone. The land's still there. But no changing rooms. So kids play football and changing cars. No toilets. The youth club is sometimes open to give them that generous assistance. Again, pretty simple, pretty basic. Any plan for sport, any plan for footballers, the biggest sport played there, would have that automatically built in. Football, with its mass wealth, isn't doing that. Or Manton. I actually employed a member of staff, Kamini Patel, who spent 3 years battling with CISWO in order to allow investment in there. And we pulled down money, Sport England money, various different types of money, put in changing rooms, put in a little mugger. It was transformed from virtually nobody using it, one club, one football team, to thousands of kids using it, thousands of girls playing football there. And that continues to this day. Decent changing rooms, decent toilets, proper safe car park, safe access in, little tuck shop room for making their teas and coffees and allowing a little bit like that. Again, they could have an all-weather and increase the numbers dramatically again. It needs a bit of assistance to get that going, but as well, they could do with the infrastructure money for the boxing. I'm not sure it's of course done legally, but only just in terms of the building that is being used there, or the athletics that's there, which again, highly successful. We are talking about potential actual Olympic medal winners training on grass, marked out in the summer at the Miners' Welfare. That is not the standard we should be aspiring to in this country. And it seems to me what that brings together is a huge opportunity for the Minister and for government. Because you've got these facilities, you've got the land, got the consents now. CISWO, I don't think it's a dynamic organisation, but it's not the irritable blocker that it was that I dealt with 5-10 years ago, trying to block every single thing, giving me plenty of grief simply because we wanted to turn drinking clubs into sports clubs for kids to use. That's now changed. So they're not going to stand in the way, but it needs some pump priming. It needs government to be saying, well, here's a bit of money. If football or cricket or athletics will put in extra money to open up this facility. And what should be the government price for doing that? The government price for doing that, Mr. Owen, and here's my final point, it's the biggest and the most important one that you'll be the most interested in, as will the Minister, I am sure. And that is this. Put the NHS as a condition of some government funding in the middle of it. Tell the NHS, you have to be part of it. You see, I'm looking at Manton Miners' Welfare, we've put some good money in. And the number of parents and grandparents watching their kids on a Saturday morning, you can't move. For parents and grandparents watching young girls and boys playing football, vast numbers, a wonderful sight. Football Foundation's most successful ever project, statistically. I hope they're listening in and recognising that. However, if we had the NHS in there as part of the condition for more facility, 3 times walking around the pitch for each grandparent, Reading University's academic research would suggest if it's a grandparent, that probably will add half a year to their life if they do it every time they watch their grandchild play football. Bring in a little bit of quantified active participation, literally bring in NHS branding, force the NHS to think through using those facilities as part of it. And then the key target group in Mansfield, in Bassetlaw, in other Coalfield communities, is precisely the parents and grandparents watching their kids in physical activity, do it as part of the deal, and we will save the taxpayer a fortune. 3 times walking round that pitch, quantified, telling them it's part of your responsibility to get all your parents and grandparents doing it, because that's why we're putting the money in. That will be huge for the NHS. So that would be the little twist I would build in. That, to me, would be transformative in Coalfield communities. And all the mental health stuff and the rest, it would be great. And it'd be saying to people, go have a drink if you want on a Saturday night. But these aren't drinking clubs. These are sports clubs as they were originally. They're going to be, again, a great national asset brought fully back into use. What a chance for the Minister to be performing round the country and taking great success in what she's done.
Will Grant.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this afternoon, Mr Owen, and I would like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Mansfield, in securing this important debate, and my colleague opposite for his passion and his enthusiasm for the changes we've seen in the communities of coalfields. Coal mining was a major industry in Ayrshire from the mid-1700s until the mid-1980s, which saw the last of the deep mines in Ayrshire, or the then National Coal Board West Area, as it was then known. Today, the surface scars of the collieries are all but gone, leaving a unique landscape of pine forests, moors, lakes, and what we see is the recovered open cast sites. There are also many sites of special scientific interest, and the area, and I'm pleased to report, it hosts an abundance of wildlife. When the coalfields were thriving, sport and culture also thrived. And over the last 150 years, some remarkably talented individuals, including musicians, sports personalities from boxing to bowling, and not least of all, Bill Shankly of football fame, have hailed from Ayrshire mining communities, not quite in my constituency, but in a neighbouring constituency for a small village called Glenbuck, and it produced a number of world-class footballers. Although many such villages have sadly disappeared, but since the mines closed, many communities remain, and they remain proud and resilient. In recent years, for example, members of the Domellington Curling Club have worked to reinstate the outside curling pond at Craigengillan, currently the only self-levelling curling pond in Scotland. And I'm almost certain members, they are using the granite curling stones quarried in the island of Ailsa-Craig, off the coast of my constituency. Moreover, the Domellington Band, which is very worth hearing and going to hear them play, and they do very well at competitions throughout the UK, they play on after 150 years in the Doon Valley. Sadly, there is much evidence which suggests an unhappy correlation between the lower indices of health and fitness, life expectancy and deprivation in former coalfield communities. And also a great deal of evidence to suggest that sports facilities are an excellent means by which to improve this particularly bad situation. At the moment, there are a number of organisations doing sterling work for the welfare of former coalfield communities, and locally we have East Ayrshire Council, the Coalfield Environment Initiative, the Coalfields Regeneration Trust, and the Coal Industry Social Welfare Organisation, to name but a few. And indeed another local organisation, the Coalfield Community Landscape Partnership, which aims to reconnect communities with a landscape by creating opportunities for leisure, tourism and hopefully jobs in these communities. And they have recently secured £2.5 million of National Lottery funding, which will do much to support their work. There is also, however, a danger of overlap. And whilst I'm very much aware that elements of sport are very much a devolved matter, community health and well-being is a matter of UK-wide importance. And in many communities, the loss of sports facilities such as games halls, golf courses and bowling greens have, I believe, left a significant health gap. And I wonder if the Minister might therefore consider whether a UK-wide approach, despite the devolved elements, but coming together with some form of joint working between governments and the various support organisations that might see an increased efficiency in the improvement of existing sports facilities and the construction, in some cases, of new ones in former coalfield communities UK-wide. And just touching this one, the proposed UK Prosperity Fund might be a tool that one could dip to improve some of these facilities that are much needed. There is the potential, I believe, to make a significant contribution to the health and well-being of these communities. Communities who in the past have played an immense part in the success of industry throughout the UK. We've taken the deep mine coal, we've taken their open cast coal, If that's not enough, we're now stealing the wind for renewable energy for these communities, particularly around the Doon Valley. And Minister, it may be time to pay them back for what they've given to the United Kingdom. Thank you very much.
Baron.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. It's a pleasure to be here with your chairmanship. Could I, first of all, thank the honourable member for Mansfield for raising this matter. Coal Industry Social Welfare has been mentioned in here. The headquarters is in my constituency, and I have to say I've worked with them over many decades in terms of the work that they are doing, and have been and continue to do in terms of around mining communities and individuals in those mining communities. Their core activity includes services in individual clients through the organisation's personal welfare service, includes advice, guidance, advocacy and grant assistance to former miners and their families. And if you look in their, on their website, they say that is their medium-term priority. Well, sadly, Mr. Owen, we all know that medium-term priority will be lessening all the time. There's not many ex-miners around now, and obviously it's a long time since the coal mines closed in some parts of my constituency. And as a consequence of that, what we have left, it has been rightly pointed out, is many recreation grounds that were tied to the local coal mine. When I was a miner in Maltby Colliery, we used to pay so much a week from our wages that went up to the miners' welfare field, and it was there effectively to help and assist in the different activities that are there that took place at that time. The problem is now the support for individual mining charities active within mining trusts, preserving recreation facilities in former mining communities. It's difficult at this stage. I believe very strongly that we should look after this for current and future generations. I had discussions on individual projects with Coal Industry Social Welfare Organisation, and I ought to declare an interest, Mr. Owen, that my grandson, 10-year-old Ted Barron, plays for Maltby Miners Junior Club at the moment. His elder brother used to play for them, but he's playing for another club now. And it is still a hive of activity in these communities, ex-coal mining communities, but very problematic. I won't go around all the grounds. I've got many. One of them has been empty for years now, and we've argued about looking at redevelopment of it and getting some sporting activity back onto it. I will mention it's in a village called Diddington in my constituency. My constituency office is there, and through Ciswell we tried to get some movement on this many years ago. We've had problems in other ones as well. You may argue personal fallouts. The biggest issue we've had recently at Maltby, and I'll say this to the Minister because I'm going to ask her to see if her department can help in some way, is that the local football team, and there's many people on there, but bowling, there's cricket, whippet racing is still an activity, although I've not seen a human beat one yet, but anyway, it's still an activity that takes place. But in actual fact, the issue around ground improvement, because there's no miners working down Maltby Colliery anymore, nobody's paying money into that welfare scheme. The bar takings are depleting by the day, the culture's changing, and what we have as a situation is a potential serious threat to that. They had a scheme, the football club, one of the football Maltby Miners Welfare it was streamed on the first FA Cup round this year, playing Pontefract Collieries. Sadly, Pontefract Collieries won. I was at the actual match and I saw it, but the main thing about that is they tried to get some improvements through the Football Foundation. And they couldn't get those improvements through the Football Foundation because of the lease system there is between Kiswell and the local trustees of the local miners' welfare trustees and the users themselves. And there's a constant debate about the cost of these. If you pepper throughout South Yorkshire, there's football clubs who are playing in quite major leagues, in obviously amateur league, but quite major league. The football clubs have left these grounds, they've been abandoned, they've gone elsewhere. At one in Kivington Park in my own constituency, that football club left about 3 years. They couldn't get on locally. And the priority for kids will always be this issue about independent advice, which I accept is important. But what I would like to see, and others would like to see, is that the legacy that coal mining left in terms of keeping health and activity in our constituencies carry on now. When you look round at the levels of childhood obesity and everything else, not saying that they should necessarily get an AHS brand, as my honourable friend from Bassetlaw says, but in actual fact, looking at these as a means of taking these to the future, they will need types of advice to do that. I'm not going to go through any more that we've had, but it's quite clear that Kiswo as an organisation has some assets in terms of buildings, and it has some assets in terms of land. Its priority at the moment is to look after people who worked in the coal industry and their dependents. I understand that quite clearly, that is the case. What it needs to do, in my view, is to have some advice about how we can look to the future so we can get Football Foundation money and different things like that to keep this recreation going and to keep our young and elderly people fitter by using these facilities, the legacy from coal mining throughout the UK. And I'm sure that if with some assistance, that CISWO would be the right organisation to do that.
Serve under your chairmanship, and I'd like to congratulate my humble friend from Mansfield for securing this debate. I think it's an important and timely one, and I'm very pleased to follow the contributions which have already been made, which I think have been incredibly important and incredibly passionate, and really reflect, I think, a combined view across all parties and all parts of this world. And I'm a near neighbour or a neighbour to some of those who have spoken, other than my honourable friend from north of the border. But he makes just as valid points from there as well. This isn't an issue that's close to my heart. I don't have the privilege of having been a miner, but my family were. My grandfather, both my grandparents were miners, and both of them effectively died from mining. And I represent one of the pits that one of my granddad's worked down before he lost his leg and was retired. And I have the privilege of representing lots of coal mining villages, including my own, which I lived in and my family have lived in for 50 years nearly. And I know how the passion and the community spirit is still there. I know how important it is to support that. And I know the experience of what people have been talking about already, because I've been round lots of these working men's clubs and lots of these community facilities in these villages over the last few months as a Member of Parliament, because I've been renting them out to hold public meetings and to talk to residents and the like. And there's a huge camaraderie, a huge community spirit in these communities that remains. And it's fair to say, and we won't debate this extensively, but it's fair to say, you know, places like mine had their stuffing knocked out of them in the 80s. And over the last 30 years or so, they've got back up on their feet and they've got moving again. But there still remains challenges. And it's places like this where the community can still come together. But often some of the communities are somewhat isolated. I represent communities which aren't that far away from the main town, Chesterfield, but actually most people look internally within that community because the bus routes aren't great, because not everybody has cars, because they're the things which actually people see and experience on a day-to-day basis. And I do think this area is an area that we as a government should think very hard about how we can support and how we can improve. And there is some fantastic work already going on, and I will just name a few. I recently was able to go to to Tupton to talk to a local rugby club who's doing fantastic work with the local community there, and it's a real asset for the village. Been to watch Eckington Football Club pull together dozens of young people every single week to work in teams and to learn and to play football. Killamosh Dynamo's doing the same in the village next door to it. Just last Friday evening, I was at a local basketball club, Arrows Basketball in Dromfield, which operates across Dromfield, Yorkshire and Killamosh. And also have seen Killamosh Juniors, which is a club which is run in order to support local activities from a sports perspective, and it has its own challenges, not least what I've been trying to help with over the past 6 months with NPower, who have put in four different smart meters and are getting different answers every time. And it just demonstrates, I know that's slightly ancillary, but it demonstrates how close some of these clubs are to the borderline, to the breadline, in order to be able to support the activities which they're doing. And we need to make sure as a government that we are recognising the important contribution that they make. So I'm somebody from my section of the party who believes in a small state, who's somebody who believes in government only spending where it's necessary rather than lots of places badly. But I am a strong supporter in infrastructure spending, and this is social infrastructure. And I can see from the places that I have the privilege to represent and the place where I have grown up, how important these kind of facilities are for the communities that we have been speaking about today. And if there is something that we can do here, I think we should consider it very strongly.
David Linden.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr Owen. It is, as ever, a great pleasure to see you in the chair and to see you in the chair in a different committee room than our usual Wednesday morning standing engagement. I'm conscious that the division bell might be about to ring in 1 or 2 moments, but I will keep the chamber going until such times as we are interrupted. I do want to start by commending the honourable gentleman, the member for Mansfield, for securing this debate today. I think he kicked off an excellent debate, and in the course of that debate we've had some excellent contributions from the honourable gentleman from Mansfield himself, the honourable gentleman from Bassett Law, Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock, who I'll come back to in a moment, the honourable gentleman for Rother Valley, and of course finally the honourable gentleman member for North East Derbyshire. My honourable friend, the member for Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock, is not someone with whom I always necessarily agree. I certainly did not agree with him, as members will have seen from my excessive gesticulation when he was suggesting that we should have a UK-wide approach when it comes to spending on these matters, but I suspect on that too we shall have to disagree. I'm certainly delighted to begin the wind-up of today's debate on behalf of the Scottish National Party, and I want to make reference to just 1 or 2 initiatives in Scotland, as my honourable friend has done, before placing on record my plea not to the Minister, because this is not a matter for her, but it's more a message to my colleagues back home in Glasgow City Council for some sports facilities in Glasgow East. But before I do that, I want to pay tribute to the work of the Coalfields Regeneration Trust, which receives financial backing from the Scottish Government in Edinburgh. £750,000 have been pledged to the Coalfields Regeneration Trust this year to support the enabling of grassroots activity, which can tackle issues around employment, sport and training. And we know the good work of the Coalfields Regeneration Trusts, and we know how much good value for money they are, because it's been reported that the Trust delivers £1.81 for every £1 it receives, so it's almost doubling the money, what they can do with that. One of the 3 current priorities of the Coalfields Regeneration Trust is health and wellbeing and encouraging sport. And since 2014, the Trust has run an annual football event for 5-a-side teams aged 14 to 16 in each country, with the finalists going on to play in the home internationals against each other. It's one of the few occasions where Scotland actually seems to be doing well at the moment, so we'll certainly be supporting that. But the Trust has also recently ran a sports challenge, inviting sports clubs and groups to bid for financial support to encourage those young people to get involved. And it wasn't just football and rugby who benefited from that. We saw basketball, lawn bowling, boxing, and even an Australian rules football club receive support. But the honourable gentleman, the member for Mansfield, is right today to frame the debate in the way he did. In my own constituency of Glasgow East, there is a particularly hot topic at the moment concerning the need for a new sports facility in Baillieston. Now, the village of Baillieston grew out of a number of small hamlets, including Cross Hill, Brachney and Bredesholme, which developed as farming and weaving communities in the latter part of the 18th century. However, the opening up of the Monklands coalfield with the construction of the Monklands Canal and later the railway has stimulated the rapid growth of Baillieston, which soon acquired the typical character of a mining village, although some weaving still survived until the end of the century. And we still have the last weaver's cottage in Baillieston Main Street. I'm glad to see that's been done up. But a continuous programme of pit sinking drew in workers from throughout Scotland and beyond, and the population grew rapidly to reach almost 4,000 by the time of the First World War. Now, of course, Baillieston now, for reasons of politics, obviously we don't quite have that mining industry, but Baillieston now is a radically different place. But we do once again have that growing population and the issues associated with that particular area, and it's for that reason that residents in that part of my constituency are quite right when they say that they want to see proper amenities and facilities that reflect the dynamic and growing population which now lives in Baillieston and the surrounding communities. And since being elected, I've certainly been working closely with my SNP colleague, Councillor Elaine Ballantyne, to apply maximum pressure to Glasgow City Council to make sure that that community gets what it was promised many, many years ago, a sports hub, which is what they were promised and what we will deliver. Thank you.
Rosanna Allen-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. It is an honour to serve under your chairmanship, and I believe our first time. I'd like to thank the honourable member for Mansfield for leading this debate. I know that his constituency is directly affected by this important issue, and it was something that his predecessor was also concerned about. 1 in 11 people in the UK live in coalfield sites, and as many of the honourable members here will know today, by most national indicators, coalfield sites fall well below the national average. My husband himself is from a little mining village in Wales, and we talk often of the challenges faced by people who live in such rural communities. Whether we examine employment rates, prevalence of ill health or life expectancy, coalfields have some of the worst levels of deprivation in the UK. Whilst the miners' strike of the 1980s may be a distant memory for some, for residents in coalfields across the country, the job losses that came next have cast a very, very long shadow. The government of the time was responsible for ripping apart these communities. The then Prime Minister did little to repair the fabric of these communities, and something which we are evidently still trying to build today up and down the country. Sports programmes delivered in coalfields have been shown to have a positive impact on these communities. They reduce antisocial activity, increase feelings of public security, and reduce the number of young people involved in violent crime. We know that for many of these communities, there's only 1 or 2 pubs in certain villages that combine people together, and sports facilities provide essential opportunities for people to be able to unite together. As the Shadow Minister for Sport, I have seen firsthand how sport can change people's lives, especially for young people. The physical benefits are plain to see, but just as important are support structures it can provide. Mentoring, friendship, a place to belong. I will continue to be an active advocate for community sports. It's not just about somewhere to play these sports. It's about coaches, people who can spot talent, people who can spot vulnerable young people and go on to help them. Sometimes people can't get the support they need in their families, and they seek to coaches in sports facilities to be that person they can rely on. It's all about camaraderie, the team, being together and knowing you're there for each other. The power of sport should not be underestimated. Most sports facilities in coalfield sites are still privately owned and operated by Coal Industry Social Welfare Organisation. I know we've heard about this today already. This is a national charity supporting mining communities, as well as overseeing hundreds of formerly British coal-owned sports facilities, which are leased out to local miners' welfare schemes. Recently, however, the Coal Industry Social Welfare Organisation made a strategic decision to not offer grant aid to support welfare schemes running recreation grounds, and instead focus on providing support services to individuals. This, part of a 3-year plan created in 2015 to cut spending by £600,000 to extend the Coal Industry Social Welfare Organisation's projected lifespan. This has led to a growing number of sports facilities in coalfields having to close. They just do not have enough money and can't keep going. This, at a time when government cutbacks have forced secondary schools to cut PE provision by almost 35,000 hours of PE teaching. It seems clear to me that this government owes a historical debt to the communities in coalfield sites. For years, these communities have worked in incredibly dangerous conditions. We've heard that already from one member who's spoken about his family involvement. They have worked in these conditions to produce the coal that fired this country's economy for decades. What reward have they received for their service? A Prime Minister-led attack on mining that described miners as the enemy within, decimating the mining industry and the communities that depend on it. I urge the Minister to consider the points that have been made in this debate and to do everything she can to reduce deprivation in coalfield sites and to particularly focus on the sustainable durability of sports facilities. Sport can improve lives. It can increase community cohesion. It gives young people a purpose. It gives families an opportunity to be together. It can change young people's futures. I urge the Minister today to ensure that the Coal Industry Social Welfare Organisation has the financial support to ensure coalfield communities do not miss out.
Minister, to respond to the debate and maybe give a couple of minutes at the end for the member for Mansfield to finish.
I'm delighted. Thank you very much, Mr Owen. Unlike my opposite member, I don't think it's the first time I've served under your chairmanship, but I'm sure nonetheless it will be as much of a pleasure as it was last time. But I would like to start by thanking the member for Mansfield for securing today's debate. I welcome the opportunity to raise awareness of this important issue and to explore with members what can be done. I'm also grateful to the members from Mansfield, Bassetlaw and North East Derbyshire for meeting with me earlier this year. I thought it was a helpful introduction into the concerns about CISWO and the aspiration of colleagues to seek greater investment into their communities. Before I head into the speech in more detail, let me just say I'd be very happy to meet with the honourable gentleman from Rother Valley about Maltby, if that helps. And also I thought my honourable friend's point about devolution was interesting, albeit challenging, given the way that funds are distributed for sport across the UK. However, we'll take that away and think about that in terms of that specific point. This is clearly an important subject, and I, like everyone else who has spoken today, firmly believe that sport and physical activity should be for everyone, no matter where they come from or where they live. Sport has the power to transform lives, and the benefits go far beyond the physical, and this is at the heart of what we're trying to achieve through the sport and physical activity strategy. At the core of Sporting Future, which was one of the first things I delivered as Sports Minister back in 2015, is a desire to create a healthier, happier and more productive nation. Supporting people to be more active in whatever way best suits them is a crucial part of this. And one of the greatest factors affecting people's desire and ability to get involved is the environment and facilities that they can access. And facilities in particular are key. For some people, especially for older generations, taking part in a sport can bring back memories of crumbling changing rooms, muddy pitches and jumpers for goalposts. Good quality, inclusive and welcoming environments are so important in encouraging people to get active and, more importantly, stay active. I'm pleased that this government is doing so much to transform sporting facilities across the country. And yes, I recognise that it's not perfect, but we are absolutely insistent that through Sporting Future, facilities and the environment for sport and physical activity should be a priority. It made clear our support for bringing together sport and physical activity facilities with other community services, and it also highlights the benefit of multi-sport facilities in improving usage and sustainability. More than that, it placed the customer or the person at the heart of facility design. Gone are the simple days of build it and they will come. We must be smarter and we must think harder. Now, to support... I would be more than delighted.
Smith. Can I thank the Minister for giving way? Given there's been local government cuts in leisure, and given that industry doesn't really support sport as it used to, certainly in my area, but given this real issue of the modern illnesses of child obesity and adult obesity across the UK, and particularly in our Coalfield communities, what more does the Minister think that the NHS can do, as my honourable friend from Bassetlaw has suggested, to make a large-scale material difference in improving the health of our country by promoting physical activity? Because the Minister's strategy is, worthy, but I suppose my question is, will it make a sufficient difference to deal with the modern killers of today, or do we need to be much more ambitious and involve the NHS?
We do already involve the NHS, but we can do more with the NHS, and it is not within my remit, it's not within my portfolio, but I can reassure the honourable gentleman that there is a lot going on in terms of social prescribing into physical activity in local communities to combat those very issues that he said. But I think there are other things that can be done, and remind me outside of this chamber to tell the honourable gentleman about some girl guides who've just visited me from Wales, who have been working very hard to get things like rugby into their schools, despite opposition from head teachers within their schools to allow girls to do traditionally boys' sports. So I would talk to him about that outside, because I don't think this is necessarily the issue that we're talking about today. But it's not just, there's no simple solution to this issue, and it's a partnership across many different agencies. Now, Mr Owen, to support the ambitions of government, Sport England is investing £40 million in large-scale facilities up to 2021 through its Strategic Facility Fund. Its Community Asset Fund provides grants of up to £150,000 to organisations and communities that want to take more ownership of the spaces and facilities in their local areas. And I'm pleased to see the extensive support that Sport England has already provided to mining communities, with £4.8 million of public investment having been awarded to 30 miners' welfare organisations since 2005. I was very interested in the comments that the Honourable Gentleman for Rother Valley made, because it says here in my script, the Kiverton Community Sports Park in South Yorkshire is a particularly successful and recent example of how Sport England funding has helped to regenerate land and support mining communities to be more active. This park is used for sports as diverse as football, cricket, tag rugby and bowls, including para sports like bocce and goalball. Clearly, we need to talk about Kiverton outside of this room. It says here it's a wonderful facility, and I'm thrilled so many people are being introduced to such a wide array of sports. Clearly, our perception of what is being delivered at Kiverton is very different to the reality on the ground, and I would welcome his feedback on that. But more importantly, it's a great, it's an example, it says here, of how local interest and drive can be harnessed to make a real difference for communities. But it's clear, actually, regardless of Kiverton, it's clear that facilities only work properly when they're properly planned, properly used and properly maintained. And this means being clear on which people we think would benefit most from using them. My honourable friend from Mansfield made the points, as others have, about CISWO, and while colleagues will appreciate that I'm not in a position to comment on the specifics of how CISWO is operated, I would encourage all interested parties, including CISWO, the Trust, local county sports partnerships and others, to come together to discuss how local communities and facilities can best be supported and managed. Now, Sport England have huge expertise in this area, and I'm sure they would be very happy to contribute to these conversations if that is of something that is interest to colleagues. We can help facilitate. We all know that many of the mining communities that have been talked about today include people from some of the hardest to reach groups in society, exactly the people who benefit the most from getting more active. And this is another key message in the sport and physical activity strategy. We want to see a strong focus from the whole sport and physical activity sector on how we can reach people who haven't traditionally got involved or who think sport or activity is not for them. There is much support already out there. Sport England has delivered a range of opportunities that place tackling inactivity and engaging underrepresented groups at their core, and it's investing up to £100 million in 12 local delivery pilots across the country. Now, these pilots focus on bringing together a wide range of partners to solve inactivity challenges in very specific locations, and we're monitoring those pilots very closely, as they will be vital in helping to deliver better interventions across the country in the future. Public funding and support can only stretch so far, but I shall make sure that the Honourable Gentleman's speech is passed on to the Chancellor ASAP. But, as I said earlier, there is no simple answer and therefore no one solution. Organisations who have great ideas about developing their facilities need to be encouraged and directed to other sources of finance and support. They need to be brought together, cajoled even. And it is in this regard that local leadership and understanding is key. Local authorities are the organisations best placed to understand what is needed in their communities and how to build support for any proposal. And the brokerage that local leaders can offer is invaluable, and I'd urge the parties involved to get around the table to find a solution. Whether it's the challenges of planning regulations, access to finance or lack of coordination, there is an opportunity here to address real community need. What we must avoid at all costs is building facilities that do not have the support of local organisations and that have not been tested with the community. And as somebody with a constituency who actually, in the very early stages of Sport England and lottery funding, did actually have a major sports facility developed and then went into administration a few years on because it hadn't had that community testing, it hadn't had the right business plan. I would really encourage that kind of thought to be given to the bids that go into the lottery organisations. Of course.
Could I just say that, Minister, I'm very grateful for what she said. I will make contact with the National Kids Office in my constituency and see if I can facilitate a meeting with Sports England and them to look at these whole issues about what is impacting up and down the land in former coalfield areas.
I think we all want to see more and better facilities, and therefore it's important that we actually work together in partnership to help people get active, but they all need to be properly planned, and I think that's where sort of kind of, leadership of colleagues here with, their colleagues in their own constituencies is incredibly important. Understanding the needs of local communities and building a broad consensus is something that is absolutely crucial. And here in central government in Whitehall, we're probably not best placed to do that, but we can provide the expertise from Sport England to help support those conversations. But in addition, the Cabinet Office and Local Government Association One Public Estate programme brings together partners from across a range of different local backgrounds to help deliver property-based projects. And I know my colleagues in the Cabinet Office would be very happy to meet with interested members to discuss this further. At the very centre of this issue is the importance of understanding how we can help communities to be more active, including how they can access better quality facilities. We all know the benefits that we gain from sport. It improves mental and physical health, it improves skills, it brings communities together, and it makes the country a more productive place, which is why we want to see the strong local partnerships come together and understand the need and therefore reinvigorate their local facilities and green spaces. This already happens in many places, but there's scope to do much more, and I want to see these communities supported to ensure that everybody, no matter their ability or background, feels able to get active and live healthy, happier and full lives. So I urge members, CISWO, the relevant local authorities and county sports partnerships to meet urgently to identify a way forward. And it is only through local collaboration and the drive of the community that meaningful progress can be made. So, Mr Owen, I'd like to thank all the members who have contributed to today's debate. I think it's been very thoughtful and insightful contributions. The points that have been expressed have been well made, and I hope that progress on this matter will be forthcoming, because like everyone else in this chamber, I'm passionate that sport should be for everyone, and that sport is at the heart of a happy and healthy nation.
And Bradley to wind up.
Mr Owen, I thank the Minister for response and consideration and for touching on the many positive things that government is doing to help grassroots sport. I welcome her interest particularly in discussing with CISWO and NGBs and would appreciate her help to facilitate that, whether it's about finding new money, and I've spoken to the Treasury about this, or whether it's about how we coordinate and bring together those partnerships that she mentioned to make sure it reaches the kind of facilities and communities that we have been discussing. All of that would be very welcome. I apologise for coughing my way through it. My next debate is about weaponising toddler germs to be used by the MOD. My honourable friend, the member for Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock, made some comments about the historic success of local clubs and sportsmen and the positive contribution that lottery funding can make, which was a very good point to include. The member from Rother Valley told us of experience of local clubs and laid out the challenges faced with CISWO. We've touched on how important it is we can bring that funding together and get them to put this plan together, as the member and my neighbour from Bassett Law pointed out. His point about the NHS involvement was interesting, and the health aspect is certainly critical. He's right there. It's the parents and grandparents of these kids who are the health priority in areas like ours, and this is clearly an access point for health services to be able to reach those people. My honourable friend from North East Derbyshire, my nan's MP, touched on the community spirit that remains and the resilience and grit of these Coalfield communities. He's absolutely spot on. I think it's a shame after positive debate about the future of our communities that the Shadow Minister couldn't help but hark back and politicise the issue. I tend to find that even in communities like ours, my constituents tend not to appreciate it, and I think my predecessors will to continue to do that as part of the reason that I am now here, truthfully. I find that very interesting. But I strongly believe that investing in sports provision in Coalfield communities should be a huge priority, particularly in terms of the health and well-being of those communities. There are opportunities here, without spending a great deal of money, to be able to create a real positive legacy for the coal industry, for these communities. I appreciate everybody's support here in Westminster Hall today. I'm grateful, Mr Owen, for the opportunity to raise this issue.
The question is, the House has considered sports facilities in coal areas. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The sit-in stand.